Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Warren Smedley. This week's short video is in preparation for our next quality team workshop on gaining confidence in making presentations and facilitating meetings. Today, we're going to do a quick review of some basic presentation skills techniques, learn a simple formula for structuring your presentation, review the assignment for next week's workshop, and then share an example of what a presentation on a lesson learned might look like. Quick review. Remember, when you structure your presentation, to structure it for your audience. Who's my audience? Think about your audience. Think about the purpose of your presentation. What are you structuring it for? In this case, we're structuring it to share a lesson learned in order to help others or motivate others to avoid whatever problem we had and hopefully not have that same problem themselves. When you prepare personally for your presentation, here are some tips as you're getting ready. Remember to stay focused on the objective that you set for this particular presentation. This is not the time to make a statement, and I've actually seen people decide that this is the time to do something crazy, demonstrate big hair or some wild dress code change. Save that for the appropriate time. That's not the time in this setting. In this setting, you want to focus on the objective. You want to make sure that you're be yourself, but dress professionally, dress neatly, be professional. And you have every right to be confident because this is your material. You're sharing a lesson that you've learned. You own it. You've earned the right to share about it. Practice, yes. Memorize, no. Please don't memorize a presentation. It can get you in trouble. We'll talk about it when we're together. Practice, yes. Know what you're going to talk about. Go through it. Rehearse it in your mind. Even rehearse it on a video. If you got PowerPoint or if you have Zoom, just open up Zoom and practice it with Zoom and then go back and watch it. Those kinds of things can help you, but don't memorize it. If you memorize it and you get nervous and you get lost, you'll fall apart. Double check your look before you start. Before you get up and go, make sure, have a partner, have a buddy to just do a quick hair and teeth check. Make sure you're looking professional, looking your best. Remember that when you get started, you want some kind of an attention-getting opener. That could be a compelling story. It could be a startling statement or a fact. It could be a question based on some need or interest. It could be a current event or an incident. Anything that catches our attention, very quick. Pow, hit them hard. Just 10 seconds, maybe 90 seconds if you've got a story. It's not the bulk of your talk. It's just to catch our attention. When you make your presentation, we talked about this, I think, briefly. Never apologize for being unprepared or being nervous. Those things happen to the extent that you can avoid being unprepared. You will always want to be prepared if you can, but sometimes it happens that you're just not prepared. But don't stand up in front of everybody and tell them, well, I'm not prepared for this, or I'm really, really nervous and I'm going to sound terrible before you. You don't need to do that. Everyone's thinking to themselves, gee, I'm glad it's not me up there. So they don't need to hear you apologize. Just start with your program, start with your story, start with your message, and just move on without having to apologize. If you make a mistake in the middle of your talk, it's fine to say, oops, that's a mistake. We'll talk about that in a second. You back up, you just start over and you just go. Jokes rarely work unless you happen to be super gifted. I would advise skipping them. You can get yourself in trouble trying to tell a joke as a part of a presentation, and then it falls flat and everybody's like, that didn't work. Sometimes it's appropriate to stick slides into a PowerPoint that are just fun, especially if you've got a long, dull PowerPoint. That can be fun. The research tells us actually that baby animals are really good to stick in the middle of a presentation because they make people feel good. Always begin with an attention-getting opener. We've driven that home already. When you are making your presentation, avoid what I call the claw. And you can see in this picture, the gentleman has his hand up, his fingers extended, and in the screen behind him, you can see it looks like he's got this claw that's reaching out, grabbing and striking at his audience. That's an aggressive posture. It's an uncomfortable posture for your audience. I would advise against using this kind of a gesture. Use your hands. We talked about that last week. Use your hands. Make your hands part of your presentation. That's fine. Just be careful not to use the claw. I would advise instead to make this kind of an open, welcoming, and warming gesture. Here, the lady has her hand open, palm up. It's inviting. It's friendly. It's safe. It's not aggressive. So avoid the claw. PowerPoints, we're not going to do PowerPoints on this particular presentation, but try to use the 6x6 rule. Occasionally, as I mentioned just a moment ago, if you lay an egg or you make a mistake, it happens. And everybody recognizes that you're human. We all know we're all human. And it actually makes you more human and more transparent if you have a mistake and you say, oops, I'm sorry, and you just fix it and you admit it, and then you just move on and forget about it and don't let it destroy your talk. The assignment for this coming week that we'll talk about here is to share a valuable lesson that you learned. The intention here is to take your personal experience, share it with others so that they can learn from your experience and avoid your problem or do something better because of what you've learned. Choose a specific personal work experience where you learned a valuable lesson that would be helpful for others to hear, and then prepare an approximately 2-minute presentation. This is short, for a 2-minute presentation to share the lesson you've learned, and then write down what you think your audience should do as a result of hearing the lesson you learned. You're going to tell us what you did. That's fine. But you need to tell us, the audience, what we need to do based on what you learned, because the whole purpose here is that you're sharing something you've learned in order to educate us, inspire us, motivate us to not make that same mistake or to take your advice and do something the right way. Make brief written notes. I suggest outline form only. We're not doing PowerPoint this time. When you're motivating others based on a lesson learned, here's some examples. You need a personal experience and you need to tell people what they need to do based on that experience that you've had. Examples could be when you're trying to change a process and get people to do something differently. Maybe you tried something one time and it didn't work, and now you're going to share uh, that experience and encourage people not to try that direction. Or you tried something previously and it worked, and you're going to try and encourage them to use that same method in the future. You may be documenting a task and trying to get people to do that correctly. You may be trying to get people to adopt a new technology or turn their reports in on time or whatever it is. But you want an action that your listeners should take, and you have to be very clear about that. Simple formula we're going to use when we do this, we call it being a star when presenting your ideas. So we use the acronym STAR. To be a shooting star, you're going to tell a story that in this case is the lesson that you've learned. It's a story. We're going to start with a specific time when that story happened. At the end of the story, we're going to share some advice or the action that you want the listener to take and the reason that they should do it, the why. Why should they do it? What would their benefit be? So here's how the STAR formula works if you think of this as kind of a timeline. How? Right in the beginning, we're going to do a tension getting opener of some kind. Real quick, grab my attention. Then we're going to start with the story. And we're going to tell your story. And when you get to the end of your story, you're going to share the advice. You learned something. Now you're giving us advice on what we should learn from your experience. And give us a reason or the why, the benefit. Why should we take your advice? Would you like to hear an example? Good. Imagine being told you have cancer and then having to wait 2 months to start your medicine. That was our situation here at UAB with specialty pharmacy back in 2016. We were sending from oncology, the oncologists were sending prescriptions off to specialty pharmacy. We had a new specialty pharmacy set up. They were still in the early days of specialty pharmacy back then. And the prescriptions were going to specialty pharmacy, and then patients were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. We were trying to figure out what was the problem. Why was it taking so long? Specialty pharmacy was doing their job. The oncologists had done their job, but the whole turnaround time of getting prior authorization for the medications was just taking 1, 2, sometimes 2 months to work through the process. We sat everybody down, got everybody in the room. We walked through the process, and we recognized that when the prescription was sent to specialty pharmacy, nobody really owned that particular process. It was a new process in specialty pharmacy. It came to them. They had the process of doing prior authorization review. They had responsibility for that, but they didn't own the process, so they had to call back to the clinic, ask the clinic for clarification, additional information. They would wait, they'd leave messages, they'd wait, they would get information back. They would send that to the insurance company. The insurance company would ask another question. It would go back to the clinic. They'd leave a message. They'd wait, and they'd go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, when we mapped this whole thing out, we saw that somebody needed to actually own the prior authorization process and own the prescription process on behalf of the patient. So we actually put a pharm tech in charge of the process in specialty pharmacy and gave the pharm tech total permission to go into the patient's record they needed and actually run the whole process, to work directly with the patient if they needed to go into the electronic medical record, get the information that they needed, and then work with the insurance company to uh, to get the prior authorization done. The pharmacist had been empowered also to make slight adjustments if necessary to the medications within the scope of their practice and what was allowable, but they could make slight adjustments in order to meet whatever requirements the insurance company had to get the patient started on their medicine. And we reduced that turnaround time to just a couple of days. It worked wonderfully. So, if you've got a problem and you can't figure it out, put everybody in the room together who's a key stakeholder in that process. Map the process out and look for gaps. Look for gaps in the process where there could be a problem, and then build back on your solution to the problem from that. So the action I'd like you to take is to, when you have a problem, you get all the stakeholders in the room to work out a map, process map of that entire process so you'll see it. And the benefit you'll receive is that you'll solve your problem much faster. Okay, that's an example of the kind of a lesson learned that you could share. We will conclude our sharing of our lessons learned by handling questions and answers. And as a reminder, we went through this last time. As a reminder, when you finish your little presentation, you will follow the formula for handling questions and answers. And we'll ask people in the room to actually ask you at least one question about your presentation, and you'll answer that question for them. So the way we'll do this is when you finish, you're going to start with, we have time for one question and answers. Who has that first question? Then you wait. If you need to, you can repeat or paraphrase, then you respond. That's all for this particular video. Looking forward to being with everybody. Linda will be back again with us on Monday. Thank you. Have a good week.